Welcome, dear listeners, to Satanists Nextdoor. We're your hosts, Lillian Levine.
And Tommy Levine.
Whether you're an open-minded, curious onlooker or a fellow Satanist seeking camaraderie, our goal is to share our personal experiences and delve into the intricate tapestry of Satanism in our daily lives, occasionally inviting other guests to share their unique perspectives, leaving no pentagram unturned. We'll explore how our beliefs shape our views on society, dive into struggles and triumphs we've encountered, and reveal the humanity that unites us all. So grab your favorite chalice and join us on this captivating journey. Satanists Nextdoor is ready to peel back the curtain and offer you a glimpse into our world, one captivating episode at a time.
Hello, listeners. So today, we're going to start off a little different. We've gotten some questions, and one question that we've gotten a couple times is, how are relationships for Satanists?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine when most people envision Satanist and like relationships, they kind of envision like we're having this 24/7 orgy or something like that.
That would be a stereotype.
Yes, definitely very, very much a stereotype. And although I'm sure there are a couple.
Hey, yeah, and do your thing.
It's not necessarily really the norm sort of thing. I would say for Satanists, the most important thing when it comes to a relationship is consent.
Absolutely.
And consent of all parties.
Right, and that brings up an interesting perspective. So when you say all parties, what does that mean?
Well, all parties means if it is a dual person relationship.
So like a typical
husband,
monogamous.
wife, monogamous. Husband, wife, husband, wife.
So a typical one-on-one partnership.
Right. A monogamous relationship. Yes. Or if it's more open.
So like we don't have any rules or values or anything about it?
Yeah, no rules. They're all out the window. But you do bring up a very important point because again, that is where consent comes in. If you have a relationship, well, even if you have a relationship with two people, there's still boundaries and...
It doesn't matter if you have a relationship with an entire polycule. It's all about what have you talked about between every individual involved in the relationship. And when you have a relationship of that nature, obviously there will be varying degrees of relationship expectation.
Yes. But, there's a lot of Satanists out there that are, single or monogamous type relationship Satanists. Monogamy.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of incredibly straightforward monogamous people, and then there are a wide variety of everything in between. All the way down to just single folks that enjoy companionship from time to time, or folks that don't enjoy sexual interaction at all.
Yeah. I mean, the total spectrum from asexual all the way up is, pretty much covered. And again, it all comes back down to consent. What are you comfortable with, and what is your partners or partners comfortable with as well, and what have you all agreed on? Because if somebody's out of the loop and not agreed, that's when bad things happen, and you're technically then lying to some. That's not cool.
Cheating definitely still happens even in open relationships or poly-type relationships. Cheating absolutely still happens, and some folks might say, well, how can you cheat on somebody when you can sleep with whoever you want? Well, that's not typically how that works.
Yep.
Usually, you let your partners know what your boundaries and expectations in a relationship are, and then anything outside of that is still cheating.
Right. And that is a really good point, because a lot of people think that in poly-type relationships that like you said, how can you cheat if if you have a girlfriend or you're allowed to sleep with somebody else? And it's just that you agreed with whoever's involved in that relationship a set of boundaries and rules. Mm-hmm. And if you say like your agreement was with Mike and Sarah, and you're seeing Ginny on the side and not telling Mike and Sarah about it, and you're lying and you're sneaking around, that's cheating.
Still cheating, yep.
that's, and you're breaking consent.
Right. Whereas if you're with Mike and Sarah and it's like, we are not going to hold you to any specific things, and if you want to have other relationships, that's fine, but I'd like you to let me know just for safety considerations.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to have consent, because of the safety aspect of it. If you believe that you're in a, let's just pretend it's a husband-wife relationship, and you are under the impression that it's a monogamous relationship, and that person steps outside of that relationship and doesn't tell you and winds up getting an STI,
right?
They've exposed you, and they exposed you because you didn't know to protect yourself.
Right. So it's important that you set your expectations. And it's not to say poly is the only other option type. There's people that are swingers. There's people that are incredibly open without any definitive guidelines. There's people that are, there's a lot of different types of relationships. And it's not just Satanists that have these kind of relationships. It's just sexual liberation tends to go hand in hand, provided you're following, we beat it to death, but the consent rules, because, can you ever really say consent too much?
I don't think you can. We could have literally wrapped the show up in 30 seconds. What does Satanic relationships about? And just said consent. Okay, thanks, guys. Podcast is over. Have a good day. No. But we thought we'd expand on it at least a little bit.
Right. And we can't speak from other people's perspectives. Obviously, I'm not in a, LGBTQ type relationship at this point in my life. We are in a very heteronormative relationship structure where it's mostly just monogamous. But, I can't speak for a gay couple, and I can't speak for people that are swingers or anything like that.
Yeah. And like you said, for the most part, our relationship is monogamous. And we both kind of said for the most part, because, we do have a slight rule that, if we meet a female, become friends with her, and everybody's kind of getting along, then we're open to having a girlfriend, and have had a couple that. But because everybody was open and honest about it, when they naturally ended, like, a lot of relationships naturally end, it wasn't a bad ending. It wasn't like screaming, shouting, somebody's leaving and stuff like that. Went bowling with the kids and all of that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was, the relationship just reached a natural end. That person either moved on or they wanted something a little bit different in their life. And
right. And because in our situation, we are not necessarily looking for an additional full-time partner, it leaves it open for folks that are just looking to hang out with some folks and have some fun. And it's not to say I still occasionally chit-chat with some of the folks that we've been involved with before that, we're still friends, still hang out, but, it's just not sexual at this point.
Yeah. And probably wouldn't be again, just because of the way that, they changed their life. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? You never know where life will take you.
Never say never.
Never say never.
But that's the important thing, is that you are flexible enough to be open to different situations, maybe, but you also have a very clear understanding of what does a relationship mean for me in my life, and what do I need out of, you as a partner, and being very, very clear. If you have any kind of open relationship dynamic, that does not mean, my partner cheated on me and now I think we should open our relationship. That's no, don't do that. I'm not going to say don't do that. If that's going to work for you, fine. But if you're changing your life dynamic because you feel pressured into it, or because you're trying to appease somebody, that's probably not going to end well.
Yeah. One, like you said, don't change it just because of a single person in the relationship wants that change, especially if you're highly against it.
Right. Well, and I think that's a danger when you're in a toxic situation, right? The person will say, I'm suggesting that we do this. And all the while, they were thinking about doing it, or they have somebody specific in mind. And that's incredibly unfair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they've already kind of had the chance to go out there, trim the herd, that whole thing. They got somebody set aside, basically on standby, and in a way, they've already committed that act.
I mean, if you're going to count as thoughts, I don't necessarily count thoughts, but
not necessarily thoughts, but the action of, I don't know. I guess it depends on how far down the road that got before you started talking about it.
If they messed around and you didn't know about it, oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
Definitely.
If you thought about it,
yeah. And the other thing to remember too, because this is where a lot of other people kind of mess up, is when they meet Satanists or anybody in a poly sort of relationship, they think, oh, this person's poly. Oh, that means that they just, jump in bed with anybody or they sleep with anybody. And then they like try and go right in on it. And it's like, no. That doesn't,
And I'm not trying to slut shame at all. There's nothing wrong with enjoying sex and being a sexual person. We're all sexual beings to some degree. Again, asexual people, maybe not so much, but some of them still enjoy cuddling and closeness and things of that nature. So there are different varying degrees of, I'll still call that intimacy, because if I'm cuddling with somebody, that's still for me a satisfying activity.
That's it. That can be intimacy, definitely.
Yeah. But I also love hugs, and I don't look at that as intimate. But certain hugs can certainly still be intimate. So.
Yeah. It gets to a point where it becomes a bit obvious if it's intimate or not. Our situation was a little bit different, as I'm a cis man that I'm straight.
Don't be using that cis slur. It's not a slur.
Am I going to get banned?
Most ridiculous shit ever.
If Elon hears this podcast, am I going to get banned for saying that?
He can suck my ass too.
And Lillian, you're bi,
right? I'm bi. I'm probably more pansexual, really, because it's not so much looks. It's the whole package thing for me, and I don't. It's how do I feel being around you? Well, who are you as a person, and do we mesh as people? Not so much like, oh, dude, look at that hot chick. I mean, yeah, I definitely still see people as attractive, but there's so much more. Like, I could see the most attractive person ever, and then they do something really awful, and I'm like, oh, there that went.
I could agree with that. There could be a really, really hot girl, and she either said something or does something, and it's like totally lost all attraction to that person.
It's got to be a whole package for me.
But ours was after we talked.
Oh yeah.
Lengthy, yes, very lengthy.
Because you were never really into the whole. Initially, you hadn't really thought about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've always been pretty much a monogamous guy, and I've been a Satanist for going on 30 years, right. But it's just what I was comfortable with.
Which is fair.
And, there was aspects that you were missing because obviously I'm not a female, so there's certain things that...
You, in fact, are not. Not to say that there's lacking in the way that, like, sex is fantastic, but there's aspects of just intimacy with a woman that's very different from intimacy with a man for me.
Right. And seeing as I'm not bi, I don't find men attractive. So we came up with an agreement that worked for our relationship.
Right. And that's the key. There's going to be a different dynamic for everyone. I know a lovely woman who has 2 husbands, and they're all very happy. And obviously I don't live with them, but every time I've seen, they look very happy. They all seem to they found a really enjoyable relationship structure that works for them, and they're incredibly happy. They've been together for years now. So we
always have to preface everything with they seem incredibly happy, because we watch enough true crime shows that they're always like, they were the happiest couple, and then he started killing people, or something like that.
They were the happiest couple ever. Little did they know he was eating people in the basement.
So yeah, I mean, but we've definitely had friends of all types on the spectrum. And and that's okay. That's the thing about Satanists is generally we're okay with any of that. And even if your relationship is just you want to be single by yourself and you're on the ace spectrum, that's okay. And
to be clear, ace people aren't just single people. They do still love relationships.
Yes. But what I was trying to say is no matter what, as long as there's consent, then Satanists are generally going to be pretty cool with it. And again, and I want to make this very, very clear, because, there's all sorts of things out there with Christians say and thing and all of that sort of stuff. Consent can only come from an adult.
Absolutely. I don't care what anyone else wants to say. You need to be a full-ass adult, 18 or hopefully more. Obviously, I'm definitely not close to 18. So for me, I would not feel comfortable with such a vast age discrepancy.
I would agree with that. But yes, so no, Satanists are not grooming children. Satanists have actually...
Some of us groom dogs, but that's not the same thing.
Oh, that's bad, because there was a Twitter post.
Okay, we're not talking about that disgusting shit. I meant literally cutting their hair. Okay?
So, but Satanists are not out there looking and grooming children or anything like that. Satanists actually have, and this this counts across the board, and when I say Satanist on this one, I'm talking TST, the Satanic Temple, Church of Satan, Temple of Set, every left-hand path organization that I have ever interacted with has a very strict
Luciferians. Yeah.
Yep, has a very, very strict no minors, no children, and it's not. I'll tell you this much: the difference between the Christian, the Catholic, and all of them, they have this forever forgiveness or whatever that they have, and they move the person. You get caught as a pedophile in Satanism, you are banned. I mean, you're like blacklisted, and there is no forgiveness. So
maybe it's a little touchier for me because I had to deal with that personally. But
Yeah.
I have, zero interest in having you in my space. It's just better for you, honestly, if as a pedophile you just stay the frick out of my space.
yeah, exactly.
I'm nothing kind to no. So no, and getting off that's another reason why being able to talk about relationship dynamics is so important. And I think because of some of the things I experienced in my life, I had a lot of guilt and shame and fear involved in even understanding what my own sexuality was. I didn't understand whether or not it was just misplaced affection, because that's a thing when you're a survivor of assault, especially as a child. You have to learn about different dynamics, and so you have to learn what feelings mean what, and that's tricky. And learning how to be comfortable with your own body and sexual behavior, period. I'm not ashamed to say that for the longest time in my personal sexual life, it was very difficult for me to enjoy certain aspects of sex because of hangups that I had and fears that I had and, flashbacks that I dealt with on a routine basis. And it would be nothing of anyone's fault, but things that I would just have to work through in order to be able to just enjoy sex, period.
Yeah, and, again, and as we, a partner, we've been together for a very long time. We've been able to grow through, and I can understand certain areas that you're coming from, because we've had those types of conversations.
Right. It's still hard, though. It's hard. I think for you, it has to be difficult because, you don't want to cause issues, but then it's hard because how do you broach certain things or how do you talk about certain things? From your perspective, that has to be difficult.
Yeah, it can be, definitely can be. But I think over the years I've learned, I know when we first got together, I was probably a stumbling idiot when it came to,
I think that's all starting relations.
talking about some subjects and, whether I even handle reactions right or, but yeah, I mean, we're a little bit off.
Right.
Topic,
but I mean, that has to do a lot with when it comes to people have questions about what kind of things that make up a sexual relationship for a Satanist. Because I think they assume the things you see on movies or the weird conversations maybe that you find in the dark corners of Reddit or something, that we just willy-nilly go out and do whatever we want. We don't have typical relationships, and some of us don't. I hate the word typical, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Where it's like this average husband, wife, and, the kids and the whatever. They say, well, that doesn't make sense. These folks don't live that way. Yes, we do.
Yeah. And we know other Satanists that are, there are other suburban Satanists that have children and husband-wife relationship. And again, and we know other Satanists that have polypod of like 10 people.
I like polypod.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. I don't know why that made me think of Polly Pocket, so I apologize.
But yeah, I mean, so it does really come down to being honest and consent.
Right.
And here's the other thing that about consent that Satanists take very seriously, and this kind of goes into I argue this a lot on women's rights on Twitter, where I'm arguing with the women against the men, is consent can be removed at any time.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter if you've started in on something or whatnot. If at any point any person decides, no, I don't want to do this anymore, consent has then been broken, and that activity stops. Or else it's,
there's none of
assault.
this, the wife is supposed to make the husband happy because, my religious beliefs tell me so. That's just ass backwards.
No, there is no, I'm in the mood, you're not in the mood. Well, tough shit. The Bible says that you're my property and I'm going to have sex anyways. I mean, it is literally, whenever, we have sex, it's totally consensual.
Well, that's what I also like about being in a satanic community. For the most part, I think people are incredibly open about talking about things like this, and people don't tend to shame individuals. You run into shitty people in every single facet of humanity. So, of course, I'm sure it's happened, but for the most part, it's incredibly liberating to be around people that don't hold specific traditional values around sexuality and don't make you feel like weird or inappropriate or judge you for things. It's a lot of people are excellent listeners and very supportive and open-minded to considering different ways of life. And sexuality, I think, is really high on the list of things people are incredibly open-minded about and considerate about.
Yeah. And the other part about consent, too, goes with women and the way that they dress or don't dress. Just because there's a woman around you and her top is off or something like that does not mean that you have consent. So I always argue consent like this. Yes is yes. Anything else is no. So silence is a no. A shy away is a no. A no is a no. Unless you get a yes, it is no. And we are very strict about that. Now, I'm not going to say every Satanist is like that. I'm not going to say there's not assholes in Satanism. I will say from my experience in different organizations, the longer an organization has survived, the better they seem to be able to flesh these things out. Early on, they're still sort of learning. And, I can tell you early on, TST had some issues with a lot of harassment internally. But I can tell you, because I'm part of a committee that deals with this sort of stuff now, that shit isn't tolerated. If somebody is sexually harassing a person in TST and it gets reported, it gets investigated, and there's actually consequences.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. And it's not to say that people didn't take it seriously before, but I don't even know if everyone knew how to deal with some of those just different things that naturally happen in certain environments.
Yeah, I mean, every organization has to grow, and they have to learn, rules. How do we investigate? How do you tell who's telling the truth? All of that sort of stuff. So, young organizations, it takes a little bit of time to get things right. But yeah. I do believe that, at least I can say from what I've witnessed with my own two eyes, TST has done a very good job of fixing that.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily even fixing, it's just learning how to appropriately address and have some kind of structure in place to deal with those things once they've been identified. So I think that's wonderful to see that kind of stuff. But it happens, in all kind of organizations. Unfortunately, some just tend to move people around or excuse things or come up with different reasons why it's not that big of a deal. It's always a big deal. People should never be made to feel uncomfortable or sexually coerced into something if that's not their intention. And I think you made a really good point when you said shy away. If someone shies away and they don't respond, as another thing that people that are either intimidated or have been through abusive situations, sometimes they're afraid to say something, especially if they're early on in dealing with some of that. And not saying anything can be a sign of intimidation, not necessarily shyness. And so it's important to kind of question things and try to understand what a person's going through instead of just assuming.
Yeah, I mean, you have to at least use your brain and try and read people's body language as well. And I say that whether you're a Satanist or not. I mean, that's just being a good person is, if somebody's shying away, why? There's probably a reason there. And like you said, it could be that they're still dealing with the early on trauma of an assault and they've mentally locked up or something like that.
Some people are just shy and some people are just awkward about stuff. So I mean, I'm not saying that's what it means 100% of the time. It's just sometimes when people shut down, it's because they don't feel comfortable in a situation, and it's a protective mechanism.
Yeah, and the other thing is drunk. If somebody can be definitely too drunk to consent,
and that goes for both people. Like if it's two men, two women, a man and a woman, either person is just as able to be beyond consent. It doesn't mean just like a woman gets drugged or too drunk and the man always takes advantage. There's definitely situations where it goes the other way.
Yeah, there is. I kind of look at it as if one person is sober or just about sober, maybe slightly buzzed, and the other person is blacked out drunk.
Right.
That person that's blacked out drunk cannot consent.
Absolutely
It doesn't
not.
matter if they're a man or a woman at all. And if they cannot consent and you push yourself on them, you have committed an assault. And period, end of story. I really don't care what your experience or excuse is. That
Right.
is just
No,
it.
you don't get to abuse other people just because you have a funny feeling in your pants. But, yeah, I guess that's the important things I wanted to discuss was just, yes, we still have relationships like everyone else. They're just a little bit more usually supportive, and they're able to be more sexually uninhibited. That doesn't mean that there isn't absolutely still people that deal with different variable degrees of being, I don't know, what do you want to call it, where they're more traditional. Mm-hmm. And that's fine too. I think for the most part, our relationship is pretty traditional and relatively monogamous.
Yeah, ours
monogam-ish.
ours definitely is. It does take the right person
it takes time to get to know. For me, I would rather get to know someone over time. It's not to say that I haven't met someone and there's been interest expressed and everyone's like, okay, this seems cool, and then we get to know the person better and things go from there. But other times, it's nice to get to know a person and develop a friendship.
Yeah, I mean, your best relationships are friends anyway. Whether the friendship came first or after, I would say in my life that you are my best friend.
Oh, you're mine too. Mushy.
But honestly, I mean, you're probably one of my only friends. I'm an asshole, but
It's true, he is. No, he's actually really fun, but he tends to be just,
Yeah, I'm like, Tombstone Doc Holliday, where they're like, well, hell, I got lots of friends, and Doc Holliday was like, I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I think again, I know a lot of people, they ask this question. We get asked this question all the time.
So we did get married. We've been married now for almost 25 years.
Yep. And, so definitely, we were both very young when we met.
Yeah, it worked out good though, because it was nice to be able to grow with somebody, and for me that worked. I'm not saying everybody run out, as a younger person and jump into a relationship, but I enjoyed it because I feel like we've grown together and we've actively work to grow together. Not so much like people have their own lives and doing their own thing. We frequently check in with each other and actually work to maintain a healthy relationship. Not to say it's perfect all the time. Not to say we haven't had plenty of our fair shares of issues, because we definitely have. It's normal to have issues between two people. It's not normal not to try and deal with them in a way that is equitable for all people involved.
Yeah. Satanists will tend to talk to each other and try and work things out versus going into the room and praying.
Oh, yeah, no.
For some...
People may pray when I get angry, but...
Yeah.
No,
definitely.
I'm playing.
Kids run and hide and lock their doors.
No, it's not to say,
that.
we haven't had arguments. I think arguments are normal. It's like, if things are being thrown across the room, maybe that's not so normal, which thankfully that's not a thing.
Unless you're a Klingon.
I mean, that's a whole different... That's not even fair. That's not a real thing.
Well, we don't know how many of our users actually know what a Klingon is, so they might not know the whole, and I read poetry to her while she throws...
Hurls.
She
hurls things
items at me. Yeah, big Star Trek fans, so if you haven't guessed that, kind of... but back to the original, everything does kind of go around consent.
Right, but it's like, some people get married, and some people don't, and some people stay in long-term committed relationships, and some people just have different relationships, and some people live in a mixed relationship. So, I mean, I know people of all different stripes, and there isn't one right or wrong way, as long as everyone's respecting one another. And, if you have kids, your kids too.
Yeah, you have to respect your kids as well, and everything is, age appropriate, obviously.
Oh, obviously you're not doing a bunch of weird stuff around your kids. That would be really messed up.
Yeah, that would be horrible.
Right.
That's like, you should go to jail sort of shit,
Yes.
So, obviously, as kids get older, when they become teenagers, your kids are smarter than you think they are, so, kids are going to figure out stuff one way or the other.
Right.
You know, so it is important to
Well, like, for instance, if you're the kind of folks that are okay with open relationships, and if you're going to have people around your kids, you should know who those people are. You should know that they're safe.
Yep.
And, you know, if your kid feels uncomfortable or expresses discomfort about anybody that's in their space, you should ask them why and figure out whether or not this is something that needs to be addressed with the other person. Because if they're doing things to make them uncomfortable, that's a big, huge issue. And I won't keep people in my life that make my kids uncomfortable.
Nope. I will walk their ass out the door so damn quick they won't even know what hit them.
Yeah, that. But, you know, yeah, everything comes down to, even with your family, that's a type of consent where you're definitely making sure that everyone in your family feels safe and comfortable and knows that they can come to you if they have concerns about anything happening in their house.
Concerns, questions, anything
Yeah,
like
questions
that,
are an easy one. Yeah, that's the whole...
And again, everything age appropriate.
Absolutely. And there's definitely age appropriate ways to discuss everything from when a child is little all the way up to when they're an adult and you're much more of a relative equal with the other person. So we've always been very upfront about anything they want to know, talk to us. And we have very few awkward conversations. It's more just naturally things will come up in a conversation, and then you keep it strict to the basic answer unless they want elaboration.
Yeah. And I mean, we have kids that are adults now, like, you know, adults.
Years.
And then we have, you know, kid that's a teenager, you know. So again, but in order to get there, they went through all phases of life, you know. And
that's another question, maybe for another day, but, you know, how do you parent?
Yeah, I think parenting will be its own
yeah.
podcast.
Because, again, people have many weird assumptions with that, just like they do with relationships. So, yeah, that's to answer the questions that we've had. We have normal relationships, and normal means we base our relationships on consent. We engage with other people and respect one another and are open about our sexual desires, hopefully, because if you're not, then it leads to very unfulfilling sexual relationships, and we don't have a ton of hang-ups related to God peeping in on our window.
Yeah, we don't believe that we have angels looking down on us. You know,
who doesn't love an audience
while we're having sex? I mean, I guess I saw that was a meme the other day, and I was like, wow, God and angels are voyeurs. I didn't realize that they're actually sitting there.
And apparently Santa.
Yeah, I mean, put on a show for them. You know, I mean, if you've got thousands of angels looking in on you while you're having sex,
they can pay for it if they want to watch. I'm sorry, this is not a freebie.
Seriously,
this is my OnlyFans. Feel free to pay up if you want to watch me. No, I don't actually have one. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm sorry. I don't give freebies out even to fictitious deities or their angelic friends.
No, not at all. So yeah, I don't know if there's a whole lot more that we can cover on this. I mean, I think we answered at least the question that we got and the questions that do come up. You know, I know people come a lot of times when people meet Satanists at a congregation or something like that the first time, you know, they do kind of shy away a little bit, you know, and the question obviously gets asked when there's big gatherings, is there nudity and is there orgies and stuff like that?
Well, sometimes there are, but again, it's a consent-related thing. But, I mean, we've been to events that has had nudity or partial nudity.
Yep.
And again, it's not like people are just running up and groping people. It's incredibly structured, and there's definite rules. You could tell people even don't like to look directly when another person is nude. You'll notice that it's more like face or feet.
Yeah.
You know, people try to respect boundaries of other people's bodies all the way across, unless a person's like, I don't give a crap if you look. And then it's still, you have to be respectful because, you know, there's still boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between looking and gawking.
Yeah.
You know, and also this is one of the other reasons why a lot of satanic organizations won't let anybody under 18 join. You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, usually before there's anything that's sexual in nature, there's a whole process and procedure that has to be put in place, and it's incredibly structured. And if that's going to take place, it's usually not a surprise. That would be a big no-no.
Yeah, and in, you know, in a lot of places, if there's going to be nudity and stuff like that, it's 21 and up. or, it's very, very strict.
Right. Just like any other place that has nudity, there's expectations around behavior, alcohol or drugs, sexual appropriate behavior, touching, and STD prevention.
Yep.
It is a litany of things that one must. I've never done a sexually explicit event. I've gone to sexually explicit events before. I've never hosted one myself. Hosting being like part of a congregation thing. Some people would do burlesque shows. Some people have just different events that involve sexuality to that degree. And it is incredibly, there's a whole list of things you have to fill out, and it's very detailed.
Yeah. I mean, it is based, again, and like I said, I don't think we can say consent enough times. It is everything based around consent.
You look at things like Lupercalia, where you celebrate sexuality and just enjoying oneself or, your partners. It's something where if you're going to have events, there's a lot of things that have to be ironed out, and it usually takes months before an event like that. And it's super built around making sure all parties are safe, everything's consensual and secure, and
yeah. So, you're not going to show up at a satanic book club and all of a sudden, about 15 minutes in, the lights are going to go off and
No, we actually read books during our book clubs.
So that is not the way that any satanic organization I have ever been a part of, and I've been a part of quite a few, has ever worked.
Yeah.
Again, they're all...
And if you do ever find yourself in a situation where someone leads you to believe that that's normal, it's not. I'm going to be the first to tell you it's not.
Yep, leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's no part of Satanism where you are forced to be naked. There is no part where you are forced into sexual expectations. Even if you're doing a ritual like a black mass, where a lot of times there is a nude altar, that is voluntary. So there is no part of a satanic organization that says, oh, you, by the way, Carrie, you're going to have to be the nude altar tonight.
Right.
No ands, ifs, or buts.
It's all voluntary. A person has to literally volunteer, and if you don't have one, suck it up. You're going to have to figure out a different way to do that.
Yep. And if anybody ever tells you that it's obligatory, leave.
Right away. Run. Quickly. Tell somebody.
Leave and tell somebody. And, contact. If you're part of an organization like TST.
You should have seen something called a code of conduct.
Yeah.
And if you read through that code of conduct, there's usually some very strict criteria about behavior. And that's another thing that's important if you're involved with anything like that. A lot of them have congregation heads. Mm-hmm. And those individuals are responsible for their actions and the way that they put themselves out there. And if they're making you feel sexually uncomfortable or doing things that you find to be sexually inappropriate, you should probably talk to somebody about that.
Yeah. And I could say from the organizations I have experience with, if you're in TST, if you're ever put in a situation like that, or you're sexually harassed or anything like that, you start with your chapter heads. If your congregation heads. So that I've been in TST for so long, I still call them chapter. They're now congregations. You start with the congregation head. If you don't get a satisfactory
unless
answer
it's the congregation head. If the congregation head did it, you'd go outside of that. But.
Yeah, if the congregation head is doing it, then you go outside of that. And if the congregation head isn't doing anything about it, then you go outside of it. There is a next step level process. If you're in COS, then, again, report it to either a priest, a magister, or, the main office. Temple of Set, same sort of thing. It goes to a pylon leader or a priest or priestess or a magister or the high priest. So they all have these very strict rules around this sort of stuff. And so you should never be forced into a situation that you do not want to be. Yep. And they all have some sort of code of conduct that you agree to.
Yeah, basic behavioral expectations.
Yep. And they're normally pretty damn strict about those things.
Yeah, I think we've ruined all the weird expectations people have about now.
Yeah, I think so. So all the people that thought, it was all of this other stuff. No, that's really just Christians lying. And those are a lot of bad Christians. Because
it's not to say that we're not a group of people that, again, we support all manner of gender identity, which is not sex.
Yep.
Not the same thing at all.
Not at all.
We support sexuality, healthy sexuality being the only type of sexuality that we support, whether it's somebody that's interested in BDSM or what, everything revolves around doing things of healthy, consensual mindset.
Yes.
And maybe we have better tips on the sex store you can go to if you're looking for a specific kind of vibrator, but that is not a bad thing. So
yeah, and we can definitely give tips and hints and things like that about all sorts of stuff, but like you said, that's not a bad thing. And it does have to stay consensual.
Right.
And that is the really important part, because a lot of people get messed up. They see nudity and they forget that nudity does not mean consent.
Right.
Nudity just means somebody was comfortable enough to take their top or bottoms off and walk around. That does not mean you get to touch or grope or gawk.
No, and I can't speak to other events because I haven't been to every single thing, but everything that I've ever been to where nudity was involved, everyone was super respectful.
Yeah. So, but yes, there's definitely rules, and we are a pretty normal. I mean, other than that, we're a pretty normal couple. Mm-hmm. Pretty normal. I mean, if you looked at our family from the outside, you wouldn't know, other than the fact that I'm going to be wearing like a Hail Satan shirt or something like that, and we fly the LGBTQ plus flag outside, the pride flag outside.
Inclusive.
Yep, trans included. Inclusive. Yeah. But other than that, it's not like, driving by the house, so you never know if you met us at the grocery store. Again, we're normal people. We really are.
And normal, it's so subjective.
Normal, yeah, it's subjective.
But it's, about your environment. And I don't think for the most part people would be put off unless they're going to choose to judge based on an exterior indicator like a shirt or jewelry or whatever.
Yeah.
We lead average lives, I would think. We get up in the morning, we do our work, we make dinner, we deal with homework, we have to do school pickups and drop-offs and all the boring crap that everybody else has to do. And and in that time, we also find time to make conversation with one another and do things that keep relationships alive, because if you don't try to interact with each other, then I think it kind of ruins your relationship. You forget about taking care of one another as far as people, not just the sex part.
Yeah, and I will say that one thing I do tend to notice about Satanists and relationships is they do have a more healthy sex life, between each other.
Right.
They seem to, because they're comfortable enough to talk about their wants, their desires, the things they like, they don't like, and all that.
Right, and that doesn't mean quite a few people had to deconstruct a lot of crap to get there, because we come from all variety of backgrounds, and just because you're not necessarily part of a Abrahamic faith now doesn't mean that you weren't part of one, and it doesn't mean those stigmas didn't stick onto you and leave lasting negative impacts for your intimate life.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, I mean, I think we've pretty much beat this one to death.
Yeah.
If you do have questions for us on this or other subjects, please do, reach out to us, send us a tweet, tag us on Twitter, or email us or something like that. Your questions, if we get good questions, we'll read them and we'll answer them. I'm kind of looking forward to being able to get more questions in and answer them. We have a lot of topics to talk about, but it's also kind of cool to get questions and, just kind of do a topic off the fly.
And the same thing I've told people in meetings or whatever, when we do meet individuals, you're not probably going to ask me anything I haven't heard before. If you do, I will let you know. But we don't tend to shy away from things provided they're not rude, crude, or inappropriate. There's just things that you don't ask people. And if you ask me and it's a douche question, I'm going to tell you that you're being a douche.
Yeah. Nothing vile or disgusting, anything like that. You're going to get a big middle finger or whatnot from us.
And again, if I had an OnlyFans, then you would know. And since I don't, you can't.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will let everybody go. And we will talk to you all on the next episode. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan, guys.